Public Library. I'm delighted to welcome you here with our partner, Portland Landmarks. My name's Janice Hastings. I'm the Development Director. And before I turn the mic over for tonight's program, I want to share a fun fact and invite you to the Portland Room. So from the fire was born the Public Library because William Willis's personal collection survived. And if you want to learn more, come to the Portland Room. So without further ado, welcome.
Hi. Wow, there's quite a few of you here tonight, so we really appreciate that. I'm Amy, and I'm the Educational Programs Manager at Greater Portland Landmarks. And I'm here to welcome you on behalf of a partnership between Greater Portland Landmarks and the Portland Public Library. So this is, I can't even count that quickly in my mind, but multiple programs that we've held here, and they have been so generous in both their time and all of the effort that they've put into making these presentations happen for us. So big round of applause for the Portland Public Library staff. Thank you. Now, before we start, I just want to give you a couple of quick housekeeping notes, especially since there's so many people in here. If you could silence your phones, that would be very much appreciated. There is air conditioning in here, but it is still rather warm. If you find yourself needing a drink of water or a rest, bathrooms and a water fountain are just outside in the hall. And then we ask that you hold your questions until the end of the talk, when Herb will be happy to take them. We have a lot of new faces here tonight, so just a quick plug as to who Greater Portland Landmarks are. We're an education and advocacy historic preservation nonprofit, and we basically raise awareness and celebrate and do everything we can to save the places that are important to you. This includes not only buildings, but public parks and places where meaningful things happened for the city of Portland and Greater Portland. And so in relation to that, I want to say a huge thank you to all of you who have donated to tonight's program. This was the most generous program donation that we've had to date. You really keep us going. That's it. Your donations are what keep me employed. So thank you. And our director of development would hit me on the head if I didn't mention that if you would like to donate and haven't already, we have a donation box at the back of the room and QR codes if you prefer to do that online. While I have your attention, I do want to let you know that tonight's talk is only part of this program. If you actually want to stand in the places that Herb talks about tonight, we still have a few spots left on our walking tour. It's running tomorrow night, Friday night, and Saturday morning. You can find all the details on our website. Registration is required because space is limited. Tickets are just $10. If you are interested and want to purchase a ticket tonight, there's a QR code at the back of the registration table. Now, a little bit about how tonight came together. So Herb came to me in the spring and said, I like your graphics. I have an idea for a presentation. And he told me that he wanted to commemorate the Great Fire of 1866 because it is the 160th anniversary. And this isn't something to celebrate. It is a very serious event that massively impacted the population of Portland and reshaped our city physically. But what we had done earlier is to commemorate the 1776 fire in October of last year. And we thought, yeah, this is something we need to do. So Herb can tell you there are actually people who lived through both of those fires, which is quite amazing. So as historic preservationists, we look at events like this a little differently than most people. We feel like it's our responsibility to learn about the buildings that survived, how the disaster shaped the new city afterwards, and then to educate and record all of this information. And so that's what we're hoping this does tonight. And we hope that it changes the way you see the buildings and the streets that you walk by and walk on every day. That's really the goal with Herb's talk and the walking tour this weekend, to help you see Portland in a new light. So now to our speaker. Many of you already know Herb Adams well. He's been a familiar face and voice in this city for a long time and has earned it. For those of you who don't, Herb is a longtime Maine state legislator from Portland, an adjunct professor at Southern Maine Community College, and a graduate of the Kennedy School of Government's executive program. He's currently at work on a biography of Maine Governor Percival Baxter. And you might also recognize him from Maine Public Radio, a number of YouTube channels. I think I saw him on the news a little while ago. He digs into the nooks and crannies of New England history and just has a really engaging way of doing that. So thank you all for being here tonight, and please join me in welcoming her.
When, on the morning of July 4th, noted Harper's Weekly, when the morning papers of this great seaport announced on the morning of July 4th that the pyrotechnic display of that evening would be of unusual magnificence. They did not foresee in what direful sense their prediction would be fulfilled before the day closed. This is the 160th anniversary of an event which changed the geometry of our streets, the setup of our society, the direction we would travel in the next century. And it is continuing today, as we shall talk about at the end. Could we have the next slide, please? The city of Portland was one of the most beautiful cities in the Union, situated on an elevated peninsula jutting into a landlocked and island-dotted harbor in Casco Bay, with wide streets shadowed by magnificent elms, fine public buildings, elegant private residences. Its two hills, commanding the most delightful scenery, the far-reaching waters of Casco Bay, with its emerald islands, the ocean, rocky shores of the Cape, and the lofty summits of the White Mountains. The beauty of its location and its surrounding views had often received the warm praises of visitors and tourists, and was the pride and boast of its citizens. Was the Portland Transcript, Walk Among the Ruins. We forget how cosmopolitan much of Maine was. In the 19th century, our great river towns and seacoast cities had real reputations worldwide. Bangor, Belfast, Portland. Portland was the winter wheat port for Canada. Belfast was bustling. Bangor was nicknamed the Queen City, the greatest lumber export city in the United States, and for a time in the world. And by rail and sail and telegraph, we were connected to the world, and that world filled Portland's pockets. We are always indebted to those who go before us. Next slide, please. This gentleman we'll hear quite a bit about. This is Mr. John Neal. May we have the next slide just for a moment? And this is Mr. William Willis. Both of these people celebrated the power of the well-written word, and the word pictures that they made 160 years ago bring the past back to us. Through them, the great fire flames again for us. They were contemporaries, they were fellow citizens, and did not like each other. They were always courteous. May we look upon the face of William Willis, lawyer, mayor of Portland, historian. His two-volume history of the city of Portland was the first of its kind to appear in an infant state that wasn't a state yet when he was born. Now, I admit, he looks grim, gray, a little overbearing, perhaps a little forbearing, and he was. He had a weak speaking voice. He had sharp eyes. His voice was in the pen. Now, make me back up just a moment. His exact polar opposite, John Neal, lawyer, author, editor, agitator, two-fisted fighting Quaker, advocate of everything, votes for women, equality for blacks, and a non-stop public speaker. I found one article about his speaking style in public. He was speaking about the Atlantic, and the newspaper said that was a perfect realm for him. He soared like the flying fish. He dove deep like the whale, wave upon wave of words. Willis said of John Neal, he was a fountain of vanity and egotism. And he was. And I love it. And you will too. Their words leap from the page. And we're going to hear them tonight. The population of Portland, let us try the next slide, please. The population of Portland, about 30,000 in 1860s, about half of what it is today. We were served by 6 or 7, depending how you count it, major railroads. Went south to Boston, north to Canada, west to New Hampshire and New York. An estimated 350 vessels were registered in Portland, from ships with 3 masts to sloops with 1. To steamers with terrible telling names of the future, like the Martha Washington or the Electric Light. Portland built 21 new 3-masted vessels in 1865. An astonishing amount for this harbor, which never freezes in the winter. Along our busy waterfront, Canadian grain came crossing to go south. Mail steamers to London went eastward twice a week. Twice a week, they also went to Machias, down east. Every other day, they went to Boston and back. There were 26 schools for 11,000 Portland students and 2 out on the islands. Now, there are still 2 out on the islands, Cliff and Peaks, but when I was on the school board, we had barely 7,000 students. There were 12 photographers in Portland, 9 of them on a single street, Middle Street. Fateful place to be, as you shall hear. The Central City Fire Department, under Chief Ezra Russell, fired 5 steam engines, 1 hand pumper, the Atlantic, which you can still go see, it still exists, down at the Spring Street Fire Museum, 1 hook and ladder company, 62 city reservoirs, and 12 city wells. However, the nearest reservoir to what we're going to speak about tonight was at 18 Commercial Street, too fatefully far away from where its water would be needed. You know, in 1866, there was no underground piping system. Water did not come from Sebago Lake. It came from your well. Portland was at the mercy of rainwater to fight its fires. Now, what was our Mrs. O'Leary's cow? How did it start? I believe that it can be concluded quite safely that it started in a boatyard on Commercial Street. That was Portland's ground zero. Dagio's and Dyer's boatyard at what was then 267 Commercial Street, Galen and Joseph Dagio. And it was across the street from, in your memories, picture where Rufus Deering Lumber Company was till 2 years ago, gone now. Right across the street from there. Portland was divided into 10 fire districts. Daguio's was in number 8. Portland had only 15 fire alarms in all of the year 1864. All that, just 15. Plus, we had an Atlantic of water right there, an entire ocean. So what's wrong with this picture? Plenty, as it will turn out. From the very first, legend says that firecrackers tossed carelessly into Daguio's boatyard shavings is where the fire first caught. Somebody may have lived all their lives, possibly into the 20th century, either knowing that they had started the fire that burned the city or never knowing it. The person who turned in the first alarm was an African-American, William Wilberforce Ruby. He's 29 or 30 years old at the time. And coming down Commercial Street, he saw this blaze and turned in the first alarm. That was 4:41 p.m. The church bells of Portland in those days did toll in order to alert people in a certain sequence that there was a fire. You would have known the sequence, just like you can identify a Buick. You would have known the sequence. Of all the bells that broadcast the alarm that day, only one still exists. One. And that is the bell of the First Parish Church Unitarian on Congress Street. All the other churches are now silent or demolished or lost in the Great Fire itself or lost to urban renewal. This is the mighty sugar manufacturing establishment of John Bundy Brown. This was the tallest manufacturing building in Maine at 8 stories in that day, and it was where he perfected the refinement of cane sugar into white granulated sugar like you use now, being aware of what the public would be sure to buy if it's better than that brown stuff you use to make cakes. John Bundy Brown Sugar Refinery also turned out as a byproduct of the processing of cane sugar, which came from his own vessels and his own plantations down in Cuba. He found that one of the byproducts is rum. Portland was one of the major exporters of thus. So it is here that the fire comes rushing up Maple Street and a little street which still exists, go find it, called Foundry Lane. It is there, comes from Commercial Street up to 4 and 4 and goes on to Maple. Next to the sugar house were Charles Staples and Sons Iron Foundry. It faced 215 Commercial in those days. And N.P. Richardson's Stove Foundry, 290 Commercial Street. So there was plenty of coke and coal to burn at both. And so that would go to glowing hot red like bonfires in your furnace and spat flames toward the homes of the next level of streets, the helpless Irish who were clustered around Gorham's Corner. Brown's, with all that alcohol, wooden hogsheads piled up, and all that open space was a chemical bomb. And it exploded. It was complete with iron shutters on both sides that melted and ran like butter down the sides of the building. It was so hot. There was no stopping the explosion of Brown's. Next slide, please. Or this, which followed. You're going to see several of these wonderful pictures painted by George F. Morse, who in fact was, I think, a draftsman down at the Portland Company, but also a very good artist. And at a later time, apparently from sketches he did at the moment, he produced these incredible images. Said the Portland transcript, the burning sugar sent out a volume of black smoke which streamed over the city like the black banner of some advancing horde of pitiless vandals. Those who saw this black flag of the fire, people far away, engaged in the amusements of the day, did not dream of the evil it presaged. The fire was now sweeping up into York Street from the ruins of Brown's, which you can see right here. They're the smokestacks thereof. And it hit what's called Gorham's Corner, a locality covered, said the newspapers of the day, with small wooden buildings mostly occupied by our Irish population. There, it gathered new strength and increasing speed, and in the vicinity of the flames, and this starts to appear for the first time in the papers, it roared and howled like a wild beast eager for its prey. The sound of the fire was a vast rumble, or like a throatless scream. It had a voice. And from the foot of Center to Cotton Street, from Cotton to Cross Street, from Cross to Union, from Union to Plum, it advanced. Could we have the next picture, please? And there you will see the fire crossed the city of Portland roughly from 7 p.m. on the clock dial up towards 2 p.m. on the clock dial, headed toward Munjoy Hill. From Plum Street, it struck the back of the brick blocks on the south side. Some hoped that these more substantial buildings would check the progress of the flames, but breaking into the rear of the stores, they were soon enveloped in flames. Next picture, please. Days Fireworks and Toy Store. Not Days of the old jewelry family. Their name was Davidson. This was Days. Charles Day's store was on Middle Street, roughly where the Bank Plaza is today, kind of opposite on the going down to the water side of Lobsterman's Park and the line of cinemas that are there. Days' stock of fireworks went off with a loud report and a brilliant display. There are many accounts by the firefighters of that day that the artillery fire was horizontal to the ground. And so, do you think I hung around there? Wrote one 50 years later. You bet I did not. A marvelous painting. Look at the individual faces of some of the people. The fire advanced with a roar like that of some infuriated monster, sending before it, as the fiery breath of its nostrils, a tempest of red-hot embers, each one an incendiary and a messenger of destruction. Whatever it lit upon was immediately in a blaze. The great body of the flames advanced with a steady and irresistible sweep, marching on like a conquering army, deploying its columns right and left and leveling all before it. Debris fell from the sky as far away as the top of Munjoy Hill. Burning paper fell at the New Meadows River, almost in Brunswick. Flames fell upon your home from the sky like pumice on Pompeii. The city lay, as it were, writhing beneath the folds of this fiery dragon, rearing its flaming head high in the air, sending up a baleful glow visible to wondering gazers 60 or 70 miles away. In my hometown in Oxford County, it's clear in the newspapers. They could look at the flickering light of the horizon 47 miles away. At sea, 124 miles away from Portland, vessels off, I've lost the place here, Belfast and such as that, saw the lights of the horizon. Next slide, please. Here, the city being swallowed by flames. You can see, again, the smokestacks of Brown's here, and the city helpless below it. doing all that could be done to resist. But for one night, all the elements of the ancient world conspired against us: earth, air, water, fire. Next slide, please. The wind from the sea is now pushing the fire from about 7 p.m. up towards 2 o'clock. Our valiant firefighters, many of them Civil War veterans, attack the fire like their artillery had once attacked Lee. That is, you make a stand, then you fight there as long as you can. And if you must retreat, you do retreat. Then you make a new stand and you turn and you fight again, which is why the map of the Great Fire looks like an ascending stairway. That is the mark of our successful fire department, and turning it back any further, then the wind was going to push it. The heat was so fierce it singed sideburns and beards. It was fought behind water-soaked quilts, held up as shields, and you had to train the hoses on it every now and again. And from behind them, our firefighters shot water at the blazes, the hoses themselves burning like fuses down the streets behind them, pumping from well after well, cistern after cistern. As they went dry and you moved to the next, retreat, stand, retreat, again and again. The heat was so bad it burst the glass on the lanterns on the engines. Flaming shingles were falling on them from the sky. The heat twisted up the horse car trolley tracks in the middle of the streets like red ribbons, cherry red, pulled them from the ground itself and twisted them. Oh. It is not true that the fire department had been up at Sebago Lake having a fireman's holiday when the fire broke out. That is a libel against them. By no means. They were there from the beginning. One of them wrote a poem about it later. Said, when fire is cried and danger is nigh, God and the fireman is the cry. But when quenched and all things righted, God is forgot and the fireman slighted. At first the wind made the fire. Then the fire made the winds. The swirling flames sucked in oxygen, pulled it down the hill, pulled it up from the harbor, shot it in flames hundreds of feet high. It rolled forward on its own wind like a rolling barrel. The fire ate oxygen. It had become a moving, breathing thing, and it is hunting for food. Northward is Munjo Hill, the observatory framed against the sky. Southward is the city, framed against the flames. And that is the picture, next please, that artist George Morse captures in paint. Tombstone casting shadows across crying Portlanders who fled into Eastern Cemetery. They hugged the ground under wet-down blankets, hoping for a little low-lying oxygen, huddling behind the stones of heroes and commoners of long ago, the living taking refuge among the dead. Homeless men and women and children were seated in scattered groups around the place, looking as if the tenants of the tombs and the graves had come forth to witness the appalling scene. Overhead, lurid clouds of smoke rolled away wildly toward the north, whence descended an incessant shower of fiery rain, wrote the Portland transcript. To add to the misery of this fearful night, robbery and extortion were rife. While many teamsters worked all night without pay, others charged exorbitant prices for removing the most common of goods. Wretches, lost to all sense of humanity, thought only of preying on the people. Women who worked hard to remove their little all from the flames returned to find it stolen. Children fell asleep over the goods they were left to guard while their parents sought to save more and were disposed of everything. Even pianos were carried off. People came in teams from the country and from coasters in the harbor and carried off loads of furniture and clothing and goods. Pickpockets, as if scenting their prey from afar, came to the great city to ply their trade. The affrighted people who looked down upon the scene from the elevated land in the neighboring town of Westbrook saw a sea of surging tongues of flame from 1,000 points, while burning masses flew through the air. It was such a sight as few have ever looked upon, and none would ever desire to see again. All around them, driven fiercely onward by the wind, the flames acquired a fury and a verve and a force which nothing could withstand. When dawn came, the city is still burning. Cellars are still glowing red with the houses that once occupied them and the coal that once was to have warmed the house. What had been a day before a beautiful and prosperous city became a scene of destruction, melancholy to contemplate, rich and poor in common ruin. As the night wore away, the exhausted people lay down in the streets to sleep, some beneath tottering walls, some literally in coffins saved from the fire, others on the remains of their own household furniture. The sun rose on a scene of desolation, seldom paralleled in the annals of war. Portland's houseless population laying worn out and exhausted amidst the ruins, like Atlanta, like Pompeii, like Carthage. Immediately, photographers knew that this had to be captured. Next slide, please. On July 6th, while flames were still burning atop Munjoy Hill, photographer Joseph Soule, S-O-U-L-E, set his camera up in the most available spaces that had escaped the fire. You will, of course, recognize the observatory tower looking down Congress Street toward the central part of the city. This lane is Congress. All of these tents were, as we're going to hear in a minute, sent to Portland by the United States Commissary General Montgomery Meigs, their Civil War surplus. And if you look very carefully, you can see outside tents some people. It's set up like an army camp. That's what Commander Meigs would have demanded. There you can see some of the headstones and monuments in Eastern Cemetery. And beyond, you can actually see the fog of smoke that is still coming up from the central part of the city as things came rushing this way. Over here, you can see some of the church steeples. Only one still exists, that one, First Parish Church. The others have all been torn down. If the camera is turned a little bit toward the waterfront, next picture, please. This would be the scene from the same place in the observatory. You can see again, and much more clearly here, the tent city that was set up all the way down toward the waterfront. So our waterfront, where the fire started, out of frame here, is more or less spared, whereas all the surrounding neighborhood is destroyed. Today, you would look down directly on top of a little white building there if you were to go up into the same vantage point. Might we go back one? No, let us not go back one. Thank you. We'll catch this in a moment. All of Portland's photographers have been burned out, but somehow Mr. Soule did have a workable camera with him. Many photographs were taken between the 12th, 13th, and 14th of July by firms from Boston. Many again went to mount in the observatory since the fire had stopped at the foot of the observatory. And you've seen the army tents stretching below in a field of refugees. But already, the fire is sending up to you sounds of hammers and saws from below. A new city is rising already. Now, can we go to the next one, please? This is from the same place at the Portland Observatory. This building still exists. This is the Freeman Mansion. It still exists. Freeman was the second luckiest, I'll tell you who the luckiest was in a minute, second luckiest man in Portland. It stopped literally in his doorstep. You can go and stand there to this very day. And I would draw your attention to this little building down in the corner of the stereo slide. This is, the fire is still steaming out of cellar holes in Portland proper, and yet they're building. See the lumber? See the building? Going up. To those of you with a good memory of old Portland, that is the Monroe Street Jail. Anybody here remember that? Not from personal experience, I'm sure, but they know. There's the Monroe Street Jail, the Iron University, the Hoosgow, the Slammer, the Gray Bar Hotel. It no longer stands, but the curbing around it does. You can go and stand on the exact spots. Housing development now. Of course, and easily 3/5 of Back Cove has been filled in since then. Easily, but here and there, I walked it during the winter so I could see it with no trees in the way. Some of these houses exist. Now, we heard mentioned the fact that there were some people that survived both of Portland's greatest conflagrations. Yes, that's true. A woman named Hannah Thurlow, who is aged 90, in her 91st years, had been carried as an infant in arms from the family home on 4th Street during Mowat's bombardment in October 1775. And she was carried again in her 91st year from the new house on the same spot. She was a double survivor. William Willis found about 6 such double survivors, and he wrote of them as only William Willis could. Like stricken matrons of Troy or Carthage, the elder women shed bitter tears over the waste spaces. Refugee cities sprang up, as you've seen, the famous tent city below Munjo Hill, much photographed. Photos like that can be seen in the observatory on display today. There was another one on Green Street, today's Forest Avenue, near today's big central post office in Parkside, my home. Tents cooking in the open air with a stick or two of furniture, wrote the newspapers, tolerably cheerful and chiefly Irish in that area. The city actually considered building barracks. Next picture, please. Artists came to Portland and also worked from photographs. Now, again, this house still exists, minus the cupola. The artists forgot to put in the little house being built there. There is the Monroe Street Jail. Here is the tent city. It is not true that there would have been a trolley system here. The horse trolley tracks had been literally curled up in the terrible heat of the blaze. But other than that, it's fairly accurate. There's the Eastern Cemetery, and there are the church spires we were talking about. Go up there. This place is there. I stood on the steps a long time hoping to meet some of the condo owners till I caught the attention of the cops, and never did meet them. The fire blazed probably hottest for 12 to 15 hours, but it continued burning for a very long time. 1/3 of the entire city was swept away. You saw the map that I put up. The very heart of the old colonial city, from the waterfront to the brow of Munjoy Hill, about 320 acres, at least 8 miles of streets, 56 streets by name. All the banks, all the newspapers, all the law offices, 9 hotels, 8 or 9 churches, City Hall itself, 3 fire stations, between 1,500 and 1,800 buildings, I think likely more, over 10,000 homeless, likely many more. It was the largest municipal fire, that is a city fire, in the history of the United States up to that moment. By the grim yardstick of tragedy, it will be excelled by the great Chicago fire, Mrs. O'Leary's cow, in a few years. But this was sufficient if you want to have any note in the record books. Next picture, please. It is hard for us to imagine what this was like. And you could get lost in the city that you'd lived in all your life because there were no landmarks. Look at the entire destruction there. The heaps of bricks, all that went on in those buildings, commerce, families, home. Next slide, please. Here is Exchange Street. That is Exchange. This round-ended building is the old City of Portland, State of Maine Customs House. Customs are the duties, the taxes you pay on things imported by sea. It stood where Tommy's Park does now. Does that help you? We're midway up Exchange Street. What's happening here is that people are already at work knocking mortar off bricks to reuse them. And when you blow this up largely enough, many of the workers are black. Next slide, please. The next morning, this is the site of this Canal Bank building. And you picture right opposite Tommy's Park, which would be here. Now, it still says Canal Bank across the top. It's not a bank anymore. But the building that replaced this one is still there. It gives you some idea, maybe, of where you are. Next morning, they heard a pounding in the ruins of Portland City Hall. And those that managed to scramble into the brick ruins unearthed a drunk who was locked in a cell in the city basement. He'd been forgotten when they came and turned the keys and let everybody run away. But very fortunately, a westerly wind supplied him with air all night through his cellar window, and he slept through the whole thing. Next slide, please. That's the luckiest man in Portland. This is the wreckage of what would have been one of the great buildings of the city, but it never got finished. Joseph Wood's Marble Hotel. It burned before the man could ever finish it. But this gives you a very good idea of how disorienting the streets are, because they're hardly the streets you knew. 2 years later, in 1868, Charles Dickens came to lecture in Portland, and he wrote home saying, this city still is adorned with these broken, blackened stumps of trees. It reminded him, he said, of some of the greatest fires in the forests of northern England. 2 years later, it was still there. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow himself came to visit what was left of his city and said, "Desolation, desolation. It reminds me of Pompeii," where he had been. Now, relief efforts. The fire departments of Bath, Biddeford, Saco came to Portland's aid. New York City itself sent $100,000, which in today's money would be about $2.1 million. Boston sent $25,000 in provisions, which would be worth about $527,000 today. Newburyport, many Portlanders had roots in Newburyport, sent $10,000, which would be about $211,000 today. The United States Congress suspended taxes for a year and sent $50,000 to Portland for relief. That'd be over $1,054,000 today. The quartermaster of the United States Army, General Montgomery Meigs, who'd been to Portland before, sent all of that U.S. Army surplus, tent, stoves, clothes, pots and pans, Civil War surplus. The New York Stock Exchange, say what you will about them, at that moment, they collected $3,000 on the floor and sent it to Portland, 60,000 bucks. And other relief came from Canada, Cuba, Saco, Gardner, Augusta, Belfast, Bath, Bangor, Lynn, Massachusetts. We can tell from reports issued at the time, but within 4 weeks later, the total amount of contributions as of that report was $269,383.29, which in today's money would be $5,678,000 plus. It included one letter from a gentleman in a southern city that enclosed a worthless Confederate bill with a note saying, please distribute this equally to all the sufferers in Portland. How do you like it, Yankees? You can see it at the Portland Public Library. They have a fine file on these, on the material from the Great Fire. Portland's own Quaker editor and city civic and cynic, Jeremiah Harker, declared the Great Fire was a judgment for the city's sin. Year after year, among other evils, he wrote in his newspaper in July 1866, I have faithfully warned the city against the insane and worse than heathenish celebrations usually held on the 4th, knowing that whatsoever we sow, we must reap, and that such folly and sin would certainly yield an abundant harvest. Let louder voices speak, for sin will be reproved if it must be by fire. Sir Jeremiah Harker, The Chariot of Fire and Wisdom and Love was the name of his newspaper. The Great Fire destroyed his newspaper offices and stopped 4 houses from his own home on Smith Street. He promptly moved to New Jersey. Yeah. From the frying pan right into. Next slide, please. This one is a very famous picture. This is Exchange Street. The camera is mounted in that round corner building that had been the post office and the customs house. And you're looking down Exchange Street toward a building that you can still go see. That is the Akers building, A-K-E-R-S. Frank Akers, one of the saviors of the old port. Next to it, you can just see the tops of the Mariners Church, which is still there. And over here, you have to look carefully, but there is a run of buildings somewhat behind the destruction of buildings here that are still there. Clayman's Bottle Shop is among them. Does that help you now see exactly where it is? Mr. Akers is a fascinating man, and I was blessed to be among the people he talked to about saving the old port. Next picture, please. Now, here again, we are looking from the old post office, toward the old post office right there, Customs House / post office. And here going down Exchange as well. Gives you an idea of the magnitude of the destruction. Next one, please. And there were many artists who did a very good job on pulling together pictures of a place they'd never been to and never saw, but put all together into really very beautiful prints. This is, we believe, the Tracy Cosler building. You know where that is? Just off of Gorham's Corner. This stretch of buildings still exist. This is Boothby Square. The fountain would be behind here. Can you see the Munjo Hill Observatory in a wreath of smoke? And some of the tent city there. It's a very good piece of work. And helps you somewhat orient yourself in the destroyed city. Next slide, please. There again, there is the post office / customs house, and this would be Tommy's Park. area here. A man named Z.K. Harmon, Zebulon K. Harmon, who was a United States pension agent. That means you would go to him if you were a veteran of any of the wars that the United States Congress had given land or money relief to the veterans thereof, and he would help you get your pension or your land grant in exchange for a degree of your money. It was a very lucrative job, and you had to get high approval to do it. Z.K. Harmon was stuck in this building when the fire came. It was supposedly a fireproof building. Well, it was, but you can see that the walls were pretty much destroyed by the terrible heat of the flames. He escaped only by wrapping his feet in heavy canvas mail bags and running for it. Now, do you cross the lava field with mail bags wrapped around your feet? Well, he did. He said the sidewalks were cherry red. You would be glad he lived because his son, you remember Loring Short and Harmon? His son. Next slide, please. Portland City Hall. You must envision that this white wall here is a building across the street. This is City Hall, exactly where our City Hall is now. Same spot, right tucked there between Myrtle and Elm. And you will recognize that there were 3 arches along the front, just like there are today. Now, this building, though gutted, was saved, and the new City Hall built within it that opened in 1867. General Philip Sheridan of the Civil War dedicated the auditorium inside there. That City Hall, this one, existed until 1908 when another enormous fire burned that. But this is why current City Hall has 3 arches, holding on to the old. And these spires of the church, that church still exists. Sure capricious the fire is. Burned the City Hall, but the little brick church behind it, designed by Charles Alexander, great architect, still stands. It was the Grace restaurant after it shut down as a church. You can go stand on the same spot. It's strange. The Great Fire came roaring down Congress Street, avoided the Longfellow house. Anne Longfellow Pierce, Henry's younger sister, stayed in the house to go down with the ship. But the fire stayed 70 feet away on the other side of the street. And it stayed there and missed the First Parish Church. Then it leaped the street and took the City Hall, but spared the church behind it. Immediately, next slide, please, the city of Portland. This is one of those rare pieces of ephemera that survived. The city of Portland began immediately to make efforts for the relief of the sufferers of the fire. Now, it calls your attention to Old City Hall. You'll see it in just a moment. Portland's government, such as it was, moved into several levels of the Charitable Mechanics Building, which still stands. That was Portland's stand-in City Hall for the duration after this. You can see they're begging for any cooked provisions. This was printed the day after the fire. Astonishing. Next slide, please. And here is Harper's Weekly. This building stood in Monument Square, exactly where the monument to the Civil War stands today. This was Portland's first and oldest city hall. And down here are the cooking cauldrons and the soup kitchen. That would be Middle Street. That would be the old International Hotel. I'm trying to, Kendall, a U.S. Hotel, thank you. And had been for a while, I think, Pearson Walker had their early offices in there. It is said that people would come who'd lost their homes, the rich and the poor. The rich would come at night. Well, they didn't want to be seen on charity. Second time that there would have been a soup kitchen there. The first would have been in the end of the Great Embargo, the Jeffersonian Embargo of 1807 to 1809, which destroyed our shipping, cost us terribly. there are, let's pop ahead just 1 minute. We must pay honor to these wonderful machines purchased by our fire department. Rather than hand pump it, these steam pumpers were regarded as these were the Apollo moonships of their day. Marvelous, incredible works. What it says here, this is Casco number 5. It says here, Veni, vidi, vinci, actually in Latin, Veni, vidi, vinci, Caesar, I came, I saw, I conquered. That's how devoted people were to these wonderful machines. And there's another picture coming next of it again, up on the promenade. Beautiful, isn't it? These were gleaming devices pulled by horses. Now, we have to move on. Portland's lesson is this. Old Portland, that is the colonial seaport with all its wooden buildings, crooked streets, ancient elms, old Portland died that night. So goodbye, Fiddle Lane, goodbye, Fish Street, goodbye, Lime Alley, goodbye, Moose Alley. Hello, Hampshire Street, Franklin Street, Exchange Street. A new Portland rose in months. Wide streets, Middle Street was made much wider. Phoenix Park, built in the middle of the city, opposite the City Hall. Lincoln Park, we call it today. Pearl Street was then driven across the width of the peninsula. Between the two, they hoped between Pearl Street and Lincoln Park, no one fire could ever again sweep across the width of the city. There would be fire breaks there. Phoenix Park the land was bought from the owners for $86,000. It'd be about $1.9 million today, because lost in there was the old Quaker meeting house where William Lloyd Garrison spoke, the Temple Street Church where Thoreau and Emerson had spoken, all gone. Those are corners of the park today. Sebago water is piped in 17 miles from the lake, 8 million gallons a day and more. The first flow was in November 1868, an inexhaustible supply. Portland is an extraordinarily lucky city to have this, all gravity fed. The Great Fire was an irony, said writers like John Neal. The new Portland was 50 years advanced from the city that burned the night before, rebuilding busily and beautifully. Neal would point out that the old and the beautiful were gone, like a fond memory, fragile as fog, thin as a sunbeam. But in a breath, something was born, something bold and busy. Portland is going up, not as on the last 4th of July in a chariot of fire, but with a calm, stately movement and occasional magnificence that we should expect in a material resurrection. What is there to stay our progress, Portland? Hereafter, wrote John Neal. Next slide, please. This is a beautiful image of Portland, manufactured in 1876 by perspective artists who walked the streets, Germans by training, and drew the buildings they saw. So if you look carefully at a copy of this, which you can get at Landmarks, I believe, you will find that individual buildings are entirely identifiable. They look exactly the way they did. By now, William Willis is gone. He died in 1871 on a cot in his library writing the morning of his death. John Neal dies in 1876. So he saw, in that sense, the resurrected city. It was a revival time. It was a change time. When all but a few croakers were converted. Can we know what such a time was like back then? Can we even identify with those people? I say, sure, because we are in one such moment now. Old new Portland is going. It's going right before your eyes. Something else is coming. It arrives every day in the blast of the cruise ship horn. It arrives every day in the hammer blow of developers. The Rufus Deering Lumber Company, where the Great Fire started across the street, is gone. Gone. One of Portland's oldest buildings sold 2 years ago. Condos stand on the site now. J.B. Brown Company does still exist, and it's still building. But come again in 2 years. Come again. Have a good memory, because everything you see will be different. Better? Worse? Well, the calendar page turns, the leaves do fall. Time waits for none of us. But if we have faith, then what Neil and others like him said still works. The phoenix still flies. And old Portland and new Portland may both say together, Resurgiam, I shall rise again. We don't have much time. Maybe we can take a couple of questions because we're actually 6:05. It's supposed to end at 6. The security guards and constabulary are looking at me menacingly in the back of the room. In a sense, this has been the history of our gentrification by incineration, which I wish we had more time to talk about. Quick questions. Take 2. Yes. Much of it was carted to Back Cove and dumped, and today you would be under our friends in Bayside. And anybody who digs a deep hole down there will come up with some of that. I have been there myself and seen much of that as people are digging new cellars and such. Yes, a good question, good question. Yeah, another one question. Yeah, I see a hand, go. Yes. Oh, yes. Very much so up on Munjoy Hill, around the vicinity of Adams Street and Newberry Street. Very much. There are many African-American blue bloods in Portland, FFV, first families, who date from the colonial era. Very, very much. I know many of them, They're still among our population today. So I'm sure that many of them were not of the, regrettably to say, highest income level at that time, but they did the dirty work of picking up Portland. You walk down Exchange Street, all those beautiful multicolored stones and buildings. The Stanton Block, which was named for Edwin Stanton, Abraham Lincoln's Secretary of War. All of those, all went up in a few months after the Great Fire, which is why the street looks so beautiful. It's all part and parcel of one single revival. I think we probably got to go, do we? I'm getting a shrug. All right, one more question. Anybody got one? Yes, over here in the corner. Yes. Yes, it is one of the churches that remained. The Abyssinian Meeting House, which is down on it was called Sumner Street, now it's Newberry Street, is, as far as we can figure, the third oldest African-American meeting house built by African-Americans for their purposes in the United States. The oldest one is actually out on Nantucket, and the second youngest is on, forgetting the name of the street, in Boston. I've been to it. The Abyssinian Meeting House was saved by, remember him, William Wilberforce Ruby, the young African-American who, among many others, gathered to throw wet quilts and blankets upon the roof of this wooden structure which had a cedar shingle roof. They climbed up on ladders and just kept throwing buckets and buckets and buckets of water upon quilts and blankets draped over the roof. Why they have water? The Abyssinian made money many years because of a stream that still runs, I have seen it, from the vicinity of the Eastern Cemetery at a 45-degree angle across their property and under the church. They would sell that water down on Commercial Street to the trains that needed it. Locomotives needed an inexhaustible amount of fresh water. Can't use salt water, it'll rot the boilers. So they had plenty of water and plenty of stamina. And you can go down there and take plenty of time now to look at the building, which is being restored bit by bit by bit, and astonishing to see what is inside. So that William Wilberforce Ruby, in fact, as a grown man, became the assistant chief of the Portland Fire Department. We're a wholly integrated fire department. It was back into the 19th century. Very rarely do you see any mention of his color. I mean, it was, you fought, you're us. And so our fire department indeed has been integrated from the 19th century on. I think now we do have to go. I have to say thank you so much. Got some good books on the fire up here if you want to see what they are. Come on up.